And so we are now recording. So I wanted to thank all of you for being here on a Friday morning with everything that you've got going on. I know this is a super busy time of the year. So thank you for giving us a little bit of time as we start to close out the year with our end of year strategic planning and assessment. Did want to pause because we've got a couple of our folks that are members of the College Assessment Accreditation team. So appreciate all of these folks who do participate and help to make this a really helpful place. So just at the very beginning, top slide is that I understand, all of you are subject matter experts and, you don't do assessment every day. So whenever we think about assessment, I understand it can be overwhelming. So I just want to encourage you that if you need help, if you need guidance, maybe you get done with your first outcome and you say, I want to make certain that I'm doing this compliant. And I would encourage you to reach out to me if you need feedback. I can provide that feedback, and I think a lot of times when folks do that, they can really help to kind of clarify some of the questions that they have. So, just I'm offering that. If you have questions, reach out. So one of the things we want to do today, our agenda is that we want to look at assessment through both SAC-COC as well as CPE eyes. We want to do a little refresher on how to enter assessments in campus labs. And then we want to talk about with our program faculty how to create these SLO improvement plan templates for programs. So we want to talk a little bit about where we are in our accreditation timeline. So we had our last reaffirmation in June of 2022. That was our decennial. And starting this academic year, we are collecting data for our 5th year. It's hard to believe, but it's going to be upon us in 2027, September the 15th. And we'll let in whoever that was that just showed up. Thank you for being here. So right now we are in that 3-year window. Whenever we write our 5th year interim report, what we're going to do is we'll provide data for the last 3 years. So everything that you are doing this year, SAC-COC is going to see. So it's super important that we get off on the right foot by making certain that our reporting is compliant. So I talked a little bit about, what does SAC-COC require? Additionally, the new CPE program review. So those of you who are program coordinators, you just need to kind of know that the new review template in CPE is Council on Post-Secondary Education. They ask you, question B.1, to describe assessment processes for student learning outcome assessment, explain how those results of those assessments have been used to make improvements to your program, provide specific examples linking assessment results to improvement efforts. So CPE is getting in on the SLO assessment game. So it's really important that we are doing these with compliance. And then, as we all know, SAC-COC standard 8.2.A and 8.2.C, everyone in this room, you're all going to be responsible to make certain that you identify expected outcomes, that you assess the extent to which you achieve the outcomes, and you provide evidence of seeking improvement based on analysis for your educational programs and your academic and student support services. So, we do have an obligation both to CPE as well as SAC-COC on assessing our outcomes. Just a little bit of data for you on Friday is that 8.2.A, which has to do with program review and program assessment. We find that in the decennial process, this is the latest data, that 47% of institutions are found not to be compliant out of the 74 different standards that SAC-COC has. This is almost half of them are not compliant on the off-site review, which is the first part of the review. Out of the 74, this is the 6th most cited. When we get to the on-site visit in either September or October, we find that still 22% of our institutions are found not to be compliant, and it moves up to the number 2 most cited. And then when we get to the Board of Directors review in December of that year, 9% of institutions are still not compliant, and it's the number 1 most cited. So we know that that assessment of SLOs for programs, it's really hot on SACCIOC's radar screen. They really want to see us closing the loop. We have to provide them evidence that we are doing that. For 8.2.C, which refers to our academic support and our student support services, so whether you're doing distance learning on the academic side, or maybe you're doing DEI on the student support side, um, you fall under 8.2.C, and we find that 41% not compliant. So that's the number 9 at the offsite, number 4 on the onsite, so 11%. And then when we get to the board of directors review, we're finding it's the number 2 most cited. So again, just like 8.2A, 8.2.C is really, really on the radar screen. So we have to make certain that we're doing that we're reporting compliant. So one of the things that, as you know, the CAT does, the assessment accreditation team does every year, and usually in October, is we review your reporting for the previous year, and we apply it to a rubric. And this year was probably one of our least compliant years in terms of overall reporting. So what I wanted to do is just kind of summarize some of the things that we saw to try to help us improve and get off on the right foot for this next year. So a couple of things that we saw is that, number one, for when we look at the outcomes, we for each outcome, we really see kind of this shifting where our list of activities just gets too long, where maybe we're trying to do way too many things to try to achieve an outcome. So it becomes difficult for us to determine success. Another thing that we see is that there are way too many performance measures. Typically, you should be able to judge or assess whether or not you're meeting an outcome by 1, maybe 2 performance measures. But we did see some outcomes that were being assessed by 7 or 8 performance measures. Again, that's a lot of work that you probably don't have to do. A lot of times we see performance measures that aren't directly measuring the outcome. So maybe it's an outcome that has to do with retention, but you provide a performance measure that has to do, or it's an outcome that has to do with retention, but the measure has to do with enrollment. So making certain that those measures directly measure the outcome is really important. And then another thing that we saw that was obviously something that we have to be doing is that we saw that some people just completely skipped out on doing the reporting last year. So obviously that's not something that we can do on a year-to-year basis, but we certainly need to be pressing in and doing a good job with that. So the biggest thing that we saw was kind of misuse of the use of results field and the improvement plans field. So those are 2 fields in campus labs or in Anthology that tie directly to this particular standard. And it has to do with the red text. So the user results field, improvement plans field, has to do with providing evidence of seeking improvement based on analysis of the results. So, what does that mean? So if we break that standard into 3 parts, they ask us first to identify the expected outcomes, and we do a great job of that. So give us a green check mark for that, because we've got those outcomes lined out. We know exactly what they are. Second, we're great at assessing the extent to which we achieve the outcome. So we've got our data, we put our data in, we say whether or not we met the benchmark. That's not a problem at all. Where we struggle with as an institution is the use of our results. So what that means is that we have to evaluate our previous improvement plans. If we go to last year, we'll look and see what it was that we said that we were going to do, and we have to evaluate whether or not it was effective. And then based on that outcome, we have to create a new improvement plan based on the results and assess again in the next cycle. So you can kind of see that this is what we saw as a CAT as a real weakness across the institution. In order for us to be compliant for 8.2, we have to meet the criteria for all 3 of these parts of that standard. So if you were going to ask yourself, how can I demonstrate use of results? There are two tests that you need to ask yourself every time you do an outcome. Number one, the thing that you said you would do last year, did you do it and was it effective? And how do you know it was effective and explain why it was or wasn't? So if I wanted to kind of boil it down to a very, very simple response that you can use to be compliant, you use this language, I guarantee you're going to be compliant every year for every outcome. Use this text, and I'll send my slides out. That way you can use it. You can copy and paste this, but use this boilerplate language. Last year, I said that I would blank, so my previous improvement plan, to improve the results for this outcome. I believe that it was or was not effective, and it doesn't have to be effective. You just need to say whether it was or wasn't effective because, and then you put your data-informed reasons here. So you use this boilerplate response, putting your own information in, you're going to be deemed to be effective. So example of what that might look like, you might say something like, last year, say you're in retention, you're in enrollment, okay? So you're on the SIM team. Last year I said I would send an extra text message to students not yet enrolled to improve results for this outcome. I believe that this improvement plan was effective because we saw 42 students enroll in the next few days after the messaging. So it's really, really clear that we've met all of the requirements of use of results in this two-sentence phrase. Okay, so use something like that. You're guaranteed to be compliant. Other things that we saw that were issues were on the improvement plan piece. So a lot of times, another thing that we see with that outcomes assessment is that we have problems with our improvement plan. So one thing that we might have is a plan that's non-existent. So, we know that all of our outcomes have to have an improvement plan. If we say I'm going to just continue to monitor, or if I say there's no improvement plan needed, then I can't assess in a future cycle because, next year we're going to come back and try to assess that plan. And then, without that, then there's no way for us to assess that plan. So we have to have a plan every year. We can't say continue to monitor. We can't say no improvement plan needed. Or maybe your improvement plan doesn't align with the outcome. Or maybe you have vague or non-committal language. You might say, we need to try to improve this, or we might try this. Well, there's no commitment there. So we really need to say, something like next year I will do ... to make certain that it's something that we can move on in terms of an improvement plan. So that the way that the cycle improvement looks is in that first year, we administer some sort of assessment. We make an improvement plan for the next cycle. In the second year, we're going to incorporate our year one improvement plan. We're going to assess whether or not it was effective. And then we're going to make an improvement plan for the third year. And then we do the same thing in the third year and in the fourth year. In that way, we're engaging in that cycle of improvement to make certain that we are closing the loop with our students with the services that we're providing them. Another thing that you should, some other common pitfalls that we typically see are, I have seen some folks just copy and paste from one year to the next. And obviously we really can't do that. We need to make certain that we are, that we're showing thoughtful input from year to year. So please don't do copy and paste from one year. Another thing is just to try to avoid a lot of technical jargon or acronym soup. We know that SIM, internally, we know that SIM stands for Strategic Enrollment Management. Or if you're in an academic program, you know that you're going to have your own technical terminology. So realize that SACCOC is going to be looking at your assessments. So make certain that we try to avoid some of those acronyms, or at least spell them out for that outside reader. And then kind of that last piece that I would encourage you to do is, print out your improvement plans. As you finish your reporting for the year, print them out. For me, that's my PPE for the next year. because those things that I say that I'm going to do when I look at my outcomes is I'm going to make certain that I've got them listed either on my PPE or I've got a whiteboard. I'm going to write them down, and that way I remember to do them when we get to August, because summer's going to hit. If you're faculty, you're going to be gone for a while. You're probably going to forget about what you said you're going to do. Print them out. That way you know what's coming up for the upcoming year, and it's fresh on your mind when you get here in August. So let's take a couple of minutes and let's look at Anthology, and let's do a very practical way of how what do I do to complete my planning for the year. Is everyone able to see my screen here?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So to get to Anthology, just the reminder is that you're going to go to the faculty and staff page on our website. And then we're going to scroll down to Anthology and Campus Labs platforms. And then you'll see 3 different modules here. The one that we want is planning. And so it's going to prompt you for your username and password. It's your KCTCS username and password, same thing that you used to log on to the computer. And then it's going to bring you to your dashboard, which may or may not have all of the outcomes that you're responsible for. So my recommendation always is to click the plans icon and then go down into your area where that has your outcomes. The first thing that you want to do is make certain that you're on the correct fiscal year. The correct fiscal year is FY 2024. That's what we're assessing on. And then also make certain that it says annual planning and outcomes. So one of the first things that you'll see is for many of the outcomes, you'll see data provided. If it says data provided, that means that I've already gone and given you some data for that outcome. So I'm just going to click on this first one. This is kind of a master outcome that we have here at the college, increasing learner success. And one of the things that we do, so we have our activities that we do. This has to do with our previous action plan, some of the tactics that we use. We have how we're going to assess those tactics. And then we have a performance measure. So how we measure that learners have success is through our strategic plan. The performance measure is our annual enrollment and then our 2-year persistence rate. So those are 2 of the college's strategic plan measures. And then you'll notice that we have some data and results that I've provided for this outcome. Our annual enrollment for the year was 1853. Our target was 1753. So we can say we were successful for the year. And then also our 2-year persistence was 71%. By the way, this is a celebration for me. I'm really excited to see a 2-year persistence rate of 71.7. That's ridiculous good. So we blew away our target, which was 57.1%, and I believe that this was number 1 in the system. So pretty excited about that. It's still a little bit unofficial, but I'm really, really excited to see that. So well done, HCC. So we've got our data and results. If you don't have data and results, then that means it's probably an outcome that you provide the data for yourself. So you have your data, and then based on the data, you want to analyze the data. So the idea behind that one is we want to interpret our data results so that's clear to everyone. So this is one that I'm responsible for. So, I'm just going to say a couple of things. First, on the annual enrollment, we met the benchmark of 1753 surpassing by 100 students exactly. And then for the other one, I'm going to do the math for me. Is that 14.6? All right. So we've got our analysis of the data. And so basically what we're doing is stating whether or not we met the benchmark. Okay. So under use of results, what we're going to do is we're going to reflect on the effectiveness of last year's improvement plan that was implemented in this cycle. So in theory, what I would do is I would go back to the previous year and select fiscal year 2023. And this is our first year of having this particular outcome because we're on our new strategic plan. So there's no previous improvement plan. But if I had an improvement plan, I would go into that same outcome and I would copy. I would kind of review what it was that I had in that improvement plan, and I would use that boilerplate language to assess whether or not I was effective. So, I would come in here and I would say something like last year I said I would dot dot dot. I believe this was effective because, or not effective because, and I know that because, and then provide some sort of data point to basically to help us understand, whether or not what we did was effective or not. So obviously, this is the first year of this. We didn't have a previous improvement plan. So if we didn't have that, then it's okay for us to say something like last year we said last year we this is the first year of our strategic plan. So we had no previous improvement plan. So that's perfectly fine if it's the first year on an outcome. But most of us, I'd say 99% of our outcomes that we have, there is going to be an improvement plan that we need to reflect on and make certain that we are closing the loop for that. And then the last thing that we have is based on our results, what are the changes that we need to do in the next year to improve on our results for this year? So we did really, really well this last year, right? But there's always room for improvement. So, one of the things that we'll do is we'll talk to the SIM team, and based on really what they want to do on enrollment and retention, we're going to put some improvement plans up here in the next year. Now, you might be tempted to do 7 or 8 different improvement plans, but really that's not necessary. When we're doing experiments, it's really important to maybe only choose one thing at a time, because if we change 7 or 8 things, it may be difficult for us to determine what it was that we did that was that really moved the needle or in a positive or negative direction. So my encouragement always is to look for one thing that can really help us move the needle on improving our results. So does that make sense to everyone? So once we complete our improvement plan, we've completed our use of results, our analysis, then what we want to do is we want to scroll back up to the top and we want to change the progress to completed. Okay. So we'll change it to completed. You'll notice that there are some other things like ongoing or unscheduled. Everything else is, those are internal that my office uses to kind of determine how we're doing on our reporting for the year. The only one that you should ever use is completed. So what that does is when you set something to completed, that lets me know that you finished your reporting for this particular outcome, and I can go in and kind of take a look at it. So you'll notice that we get a little green check mark that lets me know that it's saved. I'm going to set this back to data provided to let me know that it's not done yet. But it's very important that you do that. Now, it auto saves once you click outside. So say, for example, I make a change to this one. Once I click outside it, you'll notice that it tells me that it was auto saved at this time. Once you've set your outcome to completed, you can click done. And then if we've set it to completed, then it would say completed over here. So that's how we enter our outcome reporting for each year. Are there any questions about that particular process?
Brian,
Right.
I don't have a question, but if I
Mm-hmm.
could insert a quick comment.
Sure.
Um, I think the key is not to overcomplicate things in our minds. Um, the one example that I've heard over and over again in having done 5 on-site visits in 3 different states is a constant reminder that even if we weren't plugging all this into the planning module, and even if it wasn't being measured, it's always a good reminder for everybody that you probably are already doing this naturally anyway. You set goals, you accomplish things, you've got evidence for it, and then you have some sort of process of how you go about your department and your work of thinking about it and analyzing it and saying, well, how can I do better next year? How can I accomplish this? So I just think that's just an important reminder that you're already doing this. And the biggest mistake that most colleges make is just not putting it to paper, even in its simplest form, because they're overwhelmed with a process. And that's I guess you call it the tragedy of why those statistics that Brian mentioned earlier of how high the percentage is of noncompliance on this is it's really not rocket science. You're doing it already. It's taking the time to just document this process of closing the loop, as he said, start at the beginning and go all the way around the circle and close the loop on it. And it just makes sure you're documented. So that's my 2 cents for the whole thing, because I've just seen it over and over. And that simplification message is a common conversation every time I've ever been on an on-site visit.
That's great input. I really appreciate it, Dr. Warren. And I would just encourage you, if you get stuck, if you want me to review, reach out. If you need some sort of feedback, this is what I do every day. I'm the kind of a subject matter expert on this. I can help to provide some clarity and help you get to, kind of a compliance level. So let's move on with the last piece that we have. Couple of things to kind of remember is, don't forget to set your outcomes to completed. Again, that lets me know that you're done. Don't forget that we're reporting fiscal year 2024. Also, you might be tempted to change dates on your outcomes. Those are not read-only. Those are not read-only fields. So make certain that you don't change any dates, because what it'll do is it'll shift it to a different year, and then in the next year you'll have 2 identical outcomes. So don't change any dates. And then again, to save your work, just click outside the field until the green check mark has shown up. The last part of what we want to do is talk to our program coordinators who are with us today, is that the SLO improvement plan template. And I want to just go through this really, really quickly for those program coordinators. But the idea behind it is that you choose one outstanding program SLO from your program that might need a little more improvement. So we all have our technical program coordinators have program SLOs like SLO1, SLO2, that sort of thing. And that would be the one that you would want to look at for the improvement plan template. We use these templates to document our improvement efforts, and we provide these as primary evidence to SACS. We're going to provide them also to CPE for our program review. Essentially, what it is a very simple, easy to read, one-page summary of the SLO in your program. I will provide to our program coordinators and our discipline coordinators this template once we're done. But what you'll do is you'll take this Word document, you'll put in the name of your program, you'll put in the SLO that you assessed and the name of the SLO. You're going to describe what the assessment is. So you can pull that directly from your activities field. And then you want to provide, in the next part, you want to provide your aggregate scores for the assessment. So nothing that's student level, but your aggregate class level scores. And then you're going to pull what you put in the user results field, you're going to copy and you're going to paste it right here. So you're assessing the effectiveness of last year's improvement plan. Was it effective? Why or why not? And how do you know whether it was effective? I've provided you the boilerplate language to be compliant. So you can just take this text and you can plug your text in and provide that. And then finally, you can copy and paste your improvement plan from that particular SLO to discuss anything that you want to do in the next cycle. So what we do is we use the improvement plan template, that one pager, and we provide it to SAC-COC whenever we get to our 5th year and our decennial, just to show them that we are implementing, that we're engaging in that cycle of improvement for all of our programs. Okay. So the last thing I want to do is I want to do kind of a final exam, and this is kind of an interactive thing for folks that are here. Just kind of chime in together if you want. We want to determine when we look at user results, are these examples compliant or are they not compliant? All right, so example 1 is I had no improvement plan last year, so I cannot reflect on the effectiveness of prior improvement plans. Is this, and we're going to assume that this is an outcome that has been in use for several years. Is this compliant or is this non-compliant? Just feel free to
If it's
unmute
been
yourself.
several,
Go ahead.
if it's been several years, then it's non-compliant. You can't not have an improvement plan.
I agree with you. So if we don't have an improvement plan, then we can't reflect on that improvement plan. All right, example 2, our results this year were not what I hoped for. I want to do extra recruiting in the high school next year to boost enrollment in my program. All right, is this compliant or is it not compliant? It's a little bit harder than the first one.
Well, I don't want to be the only one that answers, but I would say that's compliant.
Okay, so
Of course, more detail would need to be added, but
mhm. So I'm going to say that it's not compliant, and the reason why is because they didn't tell us what they said that they were going to do last year. Um, so in user results, you have to talk about what I was going to do last year. You have to judge whether or not it was effective, and then and provide some sort of data. And the reason why I say it's not compliant is, yes, they say they didn't really meet the results, but they didn't really talk about that improvement plan. They didn't assess it. So for that reason, I would consider it to be non-compliant. Example 3, last year I said I would focus on customer service. Anybody else want to take a stab at why this is not compliant?
They didn't really speak on the results. What happened? Said that you would focus on customer service. Well, what were the results?
Exactly. So, we need to, provide whether or not it was effective and why it was or wasn't effective. So good job, John. Example 4, last year I said my staff would do at least 3 PD activities in the year related to retention. 100% of my staff completed the PD activities. I feel that this was effective because our retention rate went up 2%. Is this effective? I'm sorry, is this compliant or is it non-compliant? So let's examine, do we have the two tests? Number one, do we restate what we said we were going to do last year? Yes or no?
Yes.
We do. All right, agreed. And then the second test is, do we assess whether or not it was effective?
Also, yes.
All right, great. So I would say, I would agree. I think that was Zach that was talking, that we are 100% compliant in our use of results field. One more. This is kind of our bonus question. Last year, I said I would keep our webpage up to date to drive traffic to student activities. We don't feel that this was effective because student activity participation decreased. Is this compliant or is it not compliant? Anybody? Please don't make me give the answer easily.
Well, Brian, I would say it's not compliant
And why do you think it's not compliant?
because they're not providing the source of the measurement for the outcome.
Okay. So you're looking for kind of a quantitative number. Is that what you're looking for then, Kat?
That's what I was thinking. Student activity participation decreased. Well, how do we know that?
Right.
How can you prove that?
Sure.
And how many times you updated the site and what kind of items did you provide? Also,
So
I think.
So the hope is that you will have done that in our data field. Okay. So, in the data field, you're going to provide, that data that has to do with the web page. You're going to see that already in your analysis. What if we said, I don't feel like it was affected because student activity participation decreased by 5%? Would that make you guys feel better?
I personally don't like it because keeping the web page up to date is something that you should do. And the way this reads, it's like, okay, we're not going to do that anymore because we didn't get the right effect. We didn't get the outcome we wanted. So that's the problem I have with the statement.
Sure. But I think as a SACS reviewer, you're going to ask, did I meet the standard of what we're wanting to do? Regardless of analyzing what it was that we actually did, and SACS is going to want to see, did I do what I said I was going to do last year? And yes, we stated that we would keep our webpage up to date. We're providing that information. And and then they want us to assess, was it effective, wasn't it effective? And we said we don't feel that it was effective. It's okay that it wasn't effective. That's perfectly fine. The idea is that we want to continue to do experiments to try to improve student learning overall. It's okay for us also not to have a quantitative measure. Um, can it be strengthened with a quantitative measure? Absolutely. But we do, as it is, this is kind of a tricky one, but we do meet all of the requirements in this particular one for the for use of results, because we do meet all of the tests that SACS COC looks for.
Would SACS want something like a hit count on the page just to kind of provide that information to say, this page was viewed so many times based on,
I don't
previous
think that
years
they're
or
going to
whatever?
require it, but I think that it could strengthen your argument, certainly. But at its face value, this would be considered to be compliant. So good conversations here. All right, let's look at a couple of, we'll close this up by looking at a couple of improvement plans. The first example, no improvements are necessary. This is an easy one. Compliant or non-compliant?
Not compliant.
I agree with you totally. Example 2, our results were 100%, so there's no way to improve. Therefore, we will continue to monitor our future results. Is this compliant or non-compliant?
Not.
Definitely not. We always
Based
want to
on
be.
what you said, I'm sorry, Brian, based on what you said, it would be non-compliant, but if you're at 100%, it's gonna be hard to come up with a way to improve that.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are, my argument is yes, that is true. And so if that's the case, first we always have to have something we're improving on, right? Um, so if we're getting 100%, then maybe we're measuring the wrong thing. So, my encouragement would be to think about, is there a different thing that we can measure or a different way we can look at this particular outcome, so that it's not 100% every year, because, our data drives what our improvements are. So, if that were the case, then I would say, talk to me, let's figure out a different way that we can measure this, so that's a little more meaningful. And we run into this a lot, and especially in our allied health assessments, where they have an SLO that's related to some sort of checkoff that students have to do and they have to pass in order to graduate. So, say for example, it's a dosage calculation, they have to pass it every time. So, I've encouraged our allied health folks to think about, all right, so are you doing this on the first pass or maybe the second pass? And they say, well, no, I give them multiple chances. And so maybe the way for us to look at this outcome is maybe we change the performance measure to being, first time passing, that sort of thing. So, kind of looking at a way to remeasure it can help us to do it. But I would agree that, using that language as is probably not compliant, because, we're not going to be able to improve on that in the future. All right,
Hey,
example.
Brian, is a good way to look at this, in your mind. A simple way to say it is there's a whole lot of other requirements of SACS and a whole lot of the other standards where you have to meet certain goals and certain standards. But in this whole measurement slows thing, they don't care as much about the results. They care about the thoughtful reflection and analysis and continuous improvement, that there is evidence that the campus as a whole is hardwired in to plan and assess and reflect and try to get better. Everything else doesn't matter on this particular section.
I would agree with you. They want to see that you're some sort of way that I can improve, and I would definitely agree with what you're saying there. But we do need something. So maybe the improvement plan, Kat, is say, it's becoming difficult for us to assess because of 100% improvement. So next year we're going to modify this, by measuring it in such and such way. That goes back to demonstrating that reflectiveness, that responsiveness that Dr. Warren was just talking about. All right, so the last example on the improvement plan is next year we'll focus more on library acquisitions that will benefit the MAI and MLT programs. Is this compliant or is this non-compliant? Do we have any thoughts on this one? Well, let's look at it. So we have a very definite plan here. We say next year, so it's not something like, continue to monitor. It's not no improvements necessary. It's not maybe we'll do this or possibly we might try this. It's very definite. We say next year we will focus on a very specific course of action. So in that case, I would say definitely this is a really, really good improvement plan. So in that case, I would consider that improvement plan to be compliant. So final exams are over. Just want to remind everybody that our unit outcomes, everything that we do in planning is going to be due May the 31st. And so if you have, I would encourage you, you already have most of the data points are in there. I know I owe John a couple of data points once we get done with finals. But our due date for all of those is going to be May the 31st. And then if you are a program coordinator, we do need your SLO improvement plan templates by August 31st. So I know some of you like to get it done before. Some of you like to wait until August to kind of go back and look. So you do have that flexibility, but we do need those in by August 31st. So that is our presentation for today. Does anybody have any questions? I know we went through a lot of things really quickly at the beginning without the slides. Are there any questions? And I will provide the slides so that you can kind of go back and look at them. But is there anything that I can share with you at this point? All right. Well, I just want to thank everyone for being here. If you do have any questions, please reach out because I want to be a resource for you and help you along in the process just to make it a whole lot easier. So hope you all have a great day and we'll be talking to you soon. All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks so much, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks.